Good morning. We're going to just wait a minute or so before we get rolling. Let some folks populate. Good morning and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Regulation Navigation with Warren Miller, brought to you by ITS. This webinar series is centered around regulation-related topics that cover high-level compliance requirements and give an opportunity for you to learn something new or validate what you may already know and ask questions affecting your operations. ITS regulatory compliance specialist Warren Miller has been a vital part of our conversations here, and he's preparing to retire this fall after 50 exceptional years in the oil and gas industry. ITS has had both the pleasure and the honor of working with Warren. I personally have learned so much from Warren's perspective and his experience. And that's not only in regard to industry, but in life. And I found Warren's example and his mentorship to be invaluable. And for those of you that don't know, after consulting with our company for several years, in 2021, Warren joined the ITS team and our community here in Western Kentucky, where we're headquartered. And Warren, we're blessed to have you retire here and remain a part of our community. And we wish you the best wholeheartedly. Warren has covered a lot of ground over the past 50 years. We've heard him share on past episodes of this webinar and at industry events all over the country, his insights into what's coming next and explanations about why things are important. And our conversation today is going to recap some of the most informative highlights from Warren's extensive career, while also sharing ways the industry has changed, and hear his advice on what we need to do to prepare for the future. While Warren has promised to behave himself, we all know Warren. He's been promised to behave himself. We do want to make clear that Warren is speaking for himself, and his opinions and his views about the state of the industry are his and not necessarily that of ITS. So before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping to ensure this experience is beneficial for all of you. This session is being recorded. As a gentle reminder, the information and views expressed in this webinar series may be opinion and do not constitute legal advice and should not be utilized as your only source of information. So please review the disclaimer on screen before acting on any advice given, and seek guidance from legal counsel or other applicable experts if you have particular questions, issues, or concerns. We'll have time at the end of this webinar where you can anonymously ask questions about the topics we discussed today. Please type your questions into the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll address those as time permits or respond to you after the webinar via email or phone if you leave your contact information. And also, we are offering 0.1 CEUs or continuing education units. You may be able to apply to your professional development hours. So after the webinar, we send out a feedback form. You can fill that out, return it to us, and you can get a certificate for those CEU credits. Hi, I'm Chris Taylor. I'm the ITS Vice President of Learning and Compliance. I'm here to facilitate this discussion. And with me for the last time is ITS Regulatory Compliance Specialist Warren Miller. Warren, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Warren, before we get into your observations and predictions for the industry and the state of compliance, a lot has been happening lately. And can you give us a quick recap of the latest industry news?
I can, Chris. Certainly, the latest thing that just happened on August 16th of 24 is the United States Courts of Appeals for District of Columbia Circuit Court overturned some of the portions of some recent PHMSA rulemakings. So they actually kicked 4 of the 5 regulatory requirements out because of cost benefit analysis was not done in the court's opinion correctly. And so PHMSA will have to deal with those areas that have been, I guess you would call, stayed. So the PHMSA will not be able to push those requirements as it stands right now. And the different parts of the codes, basically 712C, 714D, 478, and 714. So specifically, there's information out there on the internet and certainly here that kind of tells you those places that the court did not agree with meeting the requirements of the standard rulemaking process. So these actions have been vacated and are not enforceable. So now PHMSA could either start over the rulemaking to try to reinstate these sections of the code, or they can appeal that ruling also. Second, PHMSA just sent a report to Congress about PSMS and its usage by distribution operators. Certainly many of the operators right now don't have plans in place and not likely to until required by code. Again, distribution. And these would be those smaller operators where budgets and personnel are limited. So the cost to implement this, if it's not required by code, a lot of operators just will choose not to until that time. And, the thing is, if somebody's been doing their operations correctly to begin with, wouldn't necessarily need PSMS. If they're looking how effective their programs are, O&M, emergency response, OQ, integrity management, if they're doing that and doing an honest review and then following up for any gaps, that's exactly what that PSMS is trying to drive folks to do.
And Warren, what do you think Congress is going to do with this report?
Boy, a crystal ball would be awful good to have right now. Congress may say to PHMSA that they want a regulation for PSMS, even if PHMSA doesn't want it. NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, said that they don't want it. But a member of Congress could write that in a rulemaking and it could go through, and then PHMSA and the states would be in that position. They would have to try to develop a rulemaking and decide who it's going to be for, what it's going to encompass. PHMSA has the ability to use PSMS as a catalyst for an operator, a single operator, if they had not been performing well, due to an accident or incident, and could actually use that as a compliance action. So it's still it's still something in PHMSA's pocket, even if it's not a regulation right now.
So if I'm hearing that, it could be one of the levers they could pull in a notice of amendment or a notice of proposed violation to remediate. It could be to implement specific sections or something around and hold someone accountable to PSMS in that manner.
It could be used that way. Correct.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Well, let's see. We'll be staying tuned and see what Congress, if any action comes out of Congress and authorization for PHMSA, et cetera, coming down the road. Well, while there hasn't been any recent news that we're aware of, we can't forget about recent rulemaking processes like the leak detection and repair final rule the final rule expected to come out at the end of this year or beginning of next. Isn't that right, Warren?
Correct. PHMSA has stated that probably with the election this fall, I'm guessing it would be pushed out until that first quarter. That was the last I'd heard from one of the conferences we'd attended. And again, there's no news, and they're not allowed to, give any news on exactly the effective dates, the publication dates, any of that. And then we're also waiting on that gas distribution rulemaking. GPAC meeting has not been set up yet. So GPAC has not met. There has been talk that might be a virtual meeting. So if it is a virtual meeting, one, I'm not sure how that really would be handled with just, the audience and then the committee members and how that whole process would be handled. But if it is a virtual meeting, I really encourage everybody to get in tune with that and make your voice known on what's been proposed for that gas distribution. And then Alan Mayberry, Masood Tahamtani, both of them from PHMSA in the conferences that I've been to lately have been talking about the additional regulations that are going to follow. Carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and there's others. There is a long list. So it's not stopping. It's going to continue to face additional regulation across industry.
Thank you for the recap, Warren. I don't think people realize just how far back your experience goes in the oil and gas industry. And I think we want to start out here by giving just a glimpse of your story. So where did it all begin?
Well, I grew up in the oil field. My dad actually was roughnecking back in the early 50s down in the Permian Basin on some of the discovery wells down there. It was just a way of life that we knew. By the time I was 12, our family lived in 12 homes, 12 different homes, 3 different states, of course, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, all the oil town, the states that we knew. My brother and I got to spend, quite a few Christmases on drilling locations where, the oil patch activities, they did not shut down for any holiday. So when I turned 16, I jumped at the chance to work in the field. And my first job was pressure testing tubing and casing, where we literally filled each joint one at a time, pressure tested it to 3,000 to 10,000 pounds, and rated it whether it passed or failed. And those were the days. My first job, we were out of town 2 weeks. I didn't come home. I ended up being a roustabout, roughnecked. I tested wells, and I advanced to a drilling foreman. And that's where I'd worked in the exploration and production side of the industry. I came out of college working for Arco Oil and Gas as a drilling foreman, drilling wells in Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. Got to see a lot of country. Then had the opportunity to become a consultant, and I drilled and completed oil and gas wells for small independent operators from Louisiana to Wyoming. Got to see a lot more country. Got to see a lot of antelope. That also included laying gathering lines and from well locations to sell points. So some of the gathering systems that are being inspected now, I might or might not have actually put in the ground. I was on the road quite a bit of the time. 1 year I slept in the Jimmy that I had 96 nights just due to logging, testing, running casing, the other activities, just things you couldn't drive 5 miles into town to the hotel. You had to be on location. And that was just par for the course.
Imagine 3 months living out of your car. That's not luxurious, but dedicated to the work that and needed. So, but So after working in industry, then you got into the regulatory side of the industry. Is that correct?
I did. After the Iraq-Kuwait war that broke out in 91, operations and exploration side of the industry really shut down. Had um, I had resumes around the world, and nobody was hiring. Nobody was even responding back. And then my brother told me about a position open with RISPA, which was the agency's name before it became PHMSA, out in Denver. And I began. I applied and went through that process of application, and then started with RISPA back in September of 1991. And I worked in 3 different regions: the Western region, Central region, and Southwest region. And over the course of 22 years, I got to experience almost every position that was available, from inspector, investigator, state liaison, and supervisor. And I enjoyed the regulated side just as well as the unregulated side. Then
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
1998 was kind of a big deal. Richard Sanders, who was the director at Transportation Safety Institute, that's where all of the federal and state inspectors get trained to do their work, when they come out to an operator. We were tasked with addressing the operator qualification rule, specifically how to inspect all the different types of operators, develop training for all the inspectors, and track the national inspection effort, because we had to provide Congress a report at the end of 3 years, and then meet with all the stakeholders. So over the course of 4 years, there was about 200 meetings that took place. Some of these were federal alone, some with state and federal, and then many with the industry. We had public meeting in 2003, which was a big deal that really continued the process, and of course more meetings. And then all the time doing that, I also continued inspecting operators and investigating accidents as assigned.
What an incredible career. But as you're wrapping up now, we all know it really didn't end there. Take us into your post-regulatory days.
Well, I took the opportunity to retire from PHMSA in 2014. So I've retired once or twice, and my wife knows about that, and provided consultation services to operators and contractors who requested, any type of assistance, training, whether it was OQ, O&M, just trying to help further knowledge, passing on of knowledge. When COVID hit, of course, much of the consulting work that I was performing just basically shut down due to the inability to meet with companies. I wasn't very good. I tried the team meetings, but those are pretty tough when there's nobody on the other end to listen or ask a question, seems like. One morning, my wife, Janet, she told me that she got up and said, "We're supposed to move to Murray, Kentucky," because God had told her to. We prayed about this. And then in 1 week, we were here in Murray, Kentucky, looking for a home. And we were trying to find one specific that we could live in, since we both have 4 new knees between the 2 of us. At the time, there were only 32 homes in Callaway County that were for sale. So kind of left disappointed because we hadn't found what we wanted. Drove back to Kansas City, and then within 2 hours, we had a notification on the app that popped up, that realty app that we were using. And here was a house that we talked about 20 minutes, and we bought it online. It's one of the best things we've ever done.
Wow. Another testament to faith, and taking that leap. And ITS has had the honor of working with you for a couple years in a consultant capacity ahead of that. But it was 3 years ago that you started working for the company full time, right?
Yeah, just over 3 years, and it gave me opportunity to work with the ITS clients, helping with OQ or other regulatory issues that they were seeing. Also have worked with the development group on the covered task, and specifically liquid tasks, looking at, exams, looking at any of the documentations that have been filled out. And I was also able to continue attending conferences and speak and provide the consulting services on projects that came up just on a daily basis.
Well, looking back, what was the regulatory environment like back in those RISPA days, before the OQ rule came out? What was that like, and how have you seen it evolve?
Well, back in '91, when I first started, the inspection form was just check boxes. You went in and you said, "Did you check your valves?" Yes. Show me the record. Yes. Okay, we're good to go. And making sure people were doing their valve inspections, surveys, patrols. And then information from operations and reportable incidents and accidents directed, kind of trended for RISPA prior to PHMSA to find out how operators were doing their work with integrity management plans in place. So requirement for, and then kind of 1994, RISPA had come out with a training notice proposed rulemaking that was snubbed by industry. They 100% said, no, we do not need training in the industry. And so PHMSA or RISPA pulled back and decided at that time to negotiate that rulemaking that currently exists in the rule book now.
Well, that's interesting. It's really it's an evolution of enforcement. I think you see like the maturing of enforcement. So first, it sounds like we're just checking to make sure you're doing the thing, and then it's evolving into how you're doing the thing and the quality of that performance. And I think we're seeing that in regulations like the integrity management regulations, and in some of the proposed regulations now. You're seeing a little more continuous improvement or check and program effectiveness type posture in the regulatory language. So compliance has really matured. I mean, it seems like it.
It has. Again, there's been, PHMSA sees the way things trend. And of course, they also see through the state's eyes too. So there's, it's more than just, if you're just looking at the PHMSA webpage. If you were to go to all the state web pages, you would see, okay, here are things that we're seeing, in cases or whatever. Integrity management came out close at the same time as the OQ rule. These were brand new programs that no operators had in place. So the regulation said, develop the plan, execute it, develop the plan by this date, and then you've got to execute it by this date. And then, certainly after its development, the OQ plans are expected to mature and grow as time passed.
People often say that regulations don't come out of thin air. They're typically always a result of some significant event, like an accident or an incident, oftentimes involving a fatality. Has that been your observation over the years?
It has. We've got, you go back to number one, that New London, Texas, in March 18th of 37. There were no pipeline safety regulations in place. And it actually took quite a long time to develop them. So we went from 37 to basically 1965 with still nothing specifically being required by operators. In the last 10, 15 years, we've had San Bruno, Marshall, Michigan, Merrimack Valley, and each one of those is, creates the imposition of additional requirements on operators. Every incident and accident, we've got the world on a camera now, so everybody sees it. and they carry with it a new regulation or a new adjustment. And it also changes the focus of inspectors on how they, what they focus on during their inspections. These investigations themselves lead to important moments, as findings are found. And, since 91, a big part of my life has been trying to make sure communications are out there from operators to their customers, making sure they know, hey, this is what we're doing for you. This is what we need from you. 811 certainly is the big push to make sure people are calling in before they dig.
Communications in times of emergency is so important. And it, like you said, they play into public safety, the peace of mind of the customers. And then you mentioned the damage prevention piece of it, knowledge, public awareness of there are dangerous things under this underground. So I think that speaks to the importance of being prepared. And another thing I've heard from you in your consulting, you're constantly advocating for OQ program managers, and many who may be in this audience, to ensure they get the resources they need. I'm hearing you advocate that to a company's or an organization's leadership or stakeholders, and ensuring leadership buy-in and support for the importance of operator qualification, and for those that are managing that compliance. Where are we at as an industry? Is this still something that needs addressing in the industry?
Back in the day, operators thought OQ was a fad that was going to be here and gone. RISPA and PHMSA had tried to institute a couple of programs that they'd actually pulled back on, but then OQ and integrity management came out, and again, they didn't know where they were going to go with. And I also saw this with the regulators and the operators. There were more people that were put on to the integrity management development than the OQ development. So one of the things about these OQ program managers, they need to advocate for themselves, especially now that basically the first generation since 2003, when everything, or 2002, we've got the changing of the guard for these managers. A lot of them are coming in and finding out, I don't have enough resources here to be able to do everything that's required if I'm trying to make sure the evaluators are up, the training's up, whatever the responsibilities are, especially for smaller operators that put a lot on to individuals. And many of the programs I see, the oversight is not adequate. And sometimes these companies will have one person committed to maybe just a half a year to manage a program where they really need 2 or 3 individuals to really oversee it. And again, like training, there's just one of those things that you don't know the benefit that you're getting out of OQ unless you'd had an accident and knew what the cost of an accident was. And if you've been prevented 1 or 2, that's the benefit. That's the unknown benefit that a lot of operators will never know.
And it's a challenge to argue for something that hasn't necessarily happened yet. But man, I guess you can look at examples and show your own leadership examples of this is happening to this operator. Do we want to be in the same boat? Are there so we talked a lot about some of the evolution and some of the changes over time in the industry and the state of compliance, but are there some things that have more or less remained the same over the years?
Well, first and foremost, inspectors are inspecting. That's their job. That's what they're trained to do. Some of them have different backgrounds, so the inspections may not be, they may be focused on corrosion or valves or overpressure protection. But the inspectors have a job to do. They're not picking on you. Certainly probably seems different if they're doing an accident investigation. Things can be a little bit different. Operators are still responsible for those pipelines. They can't give away any of their responsibility to a contractor or a third party provider. They are still the entity that is responsible for all the action that takes on that pipeline. And then one of the things I've done in part of my audit training for operators is to teach people being inspected not to take the critique personal. I had one inspection where I was doing integrity management plan, and every question I asked, the lead guy who had developed the plan he was losing his mind every question. And I said, this is the inspection form. I'm not picking on you. I'm trying to, you tell me what you've done to meet this requirement. So need to make sure you've got the right people in that inspection dealing with those inspectors. The inspectors are there to make sure that the design, the building, the operating, the maintaining those pipelines is according to the regulations. And it's important that, operators have the right individuals to answer those questions during that inspection.
Yeah, and we've been speaking about that evolution and change of regulations, but what are some things that are top of mind for you right now as you exit the industry? With your perspective on all this history, what's the trajectory? What's your crystal ball say?
The thing is, this LDAR, the leak detection rule, it's going to be out in 1st of 25, and gas distribution rule that still hadn't gone through GPAC. Both of those are going to impact the natural gas operators, personnel, and resources. They're going to have to really come up with some ways to be able to meet a lot of these changes that are being proposed. Again, nothing is final, so I'm trying to make sure nobody goes out and hires more people or buys different equipment until we see what actually is at the in the final rule. And then another thing I see that, and PHMSA's been talking about this the last few conferences, is damage prevention. Still got issues with damage prevention out there. It's still a priority for everyone. Thing is, everyone needs to be held to the same standard. Since my first day back in September 91, there was a house that blew up from second party damage. I really became aware of this issue. I'd already been involved with call before you dig, even back in the, my drilling and exploration, because we were laying lines and we had to make sure that we didn't cut telephone lines and water lines out in the rural areas where we were working. But I think it's time that Congress steps up and make it everyone's responsibility and not just have it driven by pipeline safety regulations. One call again, sorry, he already told you I'm going to ramble just a second. One call applications should include anyone, applicability should include anyone who excavates, and this means state highway departments, railroad companies, county departments, farmers. One call enforcement varies across the country. We've got one state, $25,000, multiple states, $500 to $1,000. Tell you what, there's a lot of violators who damage the facilities, because $500 to $1,000 for a penalty is going to be a lot less than wait time for their crew if they hadn't called for that. Problem is, it's time that changes, where there is additional, and I know there's court cases on top of that, but we've got a real diverse enforcement across the country by the states. And it's also time to get those enforcement penalties in place that will prompt compliance. If you look at the pipeline safety regulations for PHMSA, they used to have 200,000 was at their max. Now it's 2.2 million. It's taken them to figure out what it's going to take to get somebody's attention on these penalties. Same way with one call violations. NTSB, should take the opportunity to educate Congress to help bring this about by requiring other industries, underground, internet, all of those folks that are doing things. Other industries should have some type of enforcement. And one of the other things is PSMS, which is a big topic. Again, we've already talked about it. We don't know where it's going to go. But OQ should really be required foundational to operators as they strive to meet this if they even think about going to it. Those considering need to ensure the individuals that are considered competent will include new construction, which I've advocated since the regulation was finalized in 1999. You can't have competent people in a PSMS program if you've got no requirement for the people that are building your pipeline not be qualified.
Thank you for your insights and some valid points. Let's go back to, you mentioned your first day on the job as a regulator, you were dealing with a house explosion. What sticks out in your mind about that? I mean, wow, what a first day. Well,
this was the operator's ninth first or second party damage to their system that year. That means they or their contractor had hit their own line. The kid got blown out of a second-story building, landed in soft dirt, thank goodness, was not damaged, even though he wasn't hurt, bruised. But, it's just this thing 9 times in 1 year, too dang many times. Damage prevention is one of those things that, folks have really got to be working on. And I believe PHMSA is actually going to be pushing that as we go forward. So again, take a look at your inspections go. PHMSA is going to be pushing states and operators. So they'll be pushing the state inspectors also to be pushing their operators to step up and make progress. Line locating and marking are OQ covered tasks. And, there should be some added emphasis by operators to say, hey, how are we doing on our, training qualifications, for those individuals? This is one of those easy, low hanging fruit. Do your program effectiveness. Okay. We're doing all this training. These guys are evaluated. Are we having mislocates? Are we having hits due to that? And then consider, okay, have we disqualified anybody? Have we required anybody to have additional training? So, those are things that I see a weakness as I've done inspections is, they get a certain amount of misses or incorrect locates. And I'm going, but they're not completing the covered task by regulation. Looks to me like they should be disqualified. Again, I'm just an old regulator.
Well, I mean, you're identifying some low-hanging fruit that would have direct impact on the safety of a pipeline is targeting those damage prevention programs and doing QA/QC and really, or inspecting or having some mechanisms and measuring and looking at the data of mislocates and creating some ramifications and remediation steps for your personnel. And that's program effectiveness. That's making it better.
And thus the same thing PSMS is requiring.
And you'll get credit toward your efforts for PSMS. And that's really what it's about. ITS is very much intertwined with training aspects of OQ. But how do you see training and how have you seen training evolve over the years and into the next?
Right now, training has never been more important to the industry and to the nation, really. There's so many men and women that are retiring, leaving positions, and there are companies out there who have not planned for the loss of that key long-term employee or those employees who have a wealth of knowledge and experience. So they haven't had a mentorship program, nothing. So many operators haven't put the resources into the training or mentoring or even hiring in some cases. So we've even got gaps in workforce. And certainly right now, with the younger younger individuals coming into the industry, the workforce background. So, their background coming in to this side of the industry have are drastically different, especially with the age of computers and cell phones. Considerations got to be also made for the methodologies for direct training due to these generational differences. I saw this done in 2008. We were supervisors, and there was a group that came in and portrayed the 5 generations back then, and it was quite astounding. And now it's even more. We've gone from paper to CBTs to computers and phones, and now files on the cloud. We've got VR. People are going to respond to this technology differently. But the important part is ensuring that the training is complete for any individual that's going to perform that covered task, doing that procedure, that they know that, they still all, no matter what methodology, it's complete. Let's use a VR. I think is great as a training program. Some companies have already utilized it. It's helped them, introduce things to people that they might not see normally. But there are some folks that have talked about this virtual reality for evaluations, and I'm telling you, I don't think that's going to meet that requirement of the regulation about performance on the facility. And then another area we're at, and this has been coming for a number of years, there's been a steady decline of willing, able-bodied men and women who can work with their hands and understand fundamental directions. So, we're kind of in a pretty good pickle of trying to make sure that, there's going to be enough people out there to actually do the hands-on work that it takes to keep this energy going. And then we've seen some of the states that have changed OQ. We got New York. Certainly there's other folks that have, made changes, but this is also making it tough for intrastate operators and their contractors, especially if they work cross state lines from a state that's not made changes or different. So now they're having to track who can actually go into the state of New York. And there's, again, additional pinches on those resources. And if you're a contractor right now and you're working on, especially if you're working on a proposal to work somewhere you've never worked before, make sure you look at those state regs to see if you need something else to meet the requirements for OQ.
Wow. Yeah, it's New York specifically, very, very interesting. New requirements on even how testing is done. And so invalidating OQs, if you haven't done it a certain way, or your program is not grading in a certain way against abnormal operating conditions criteria, it's very interesting how that sector or that state and many others are looking at that. And so
Yeah.
Speaking of that, what changes do you foresee for OQ? We kind of talked about
Well,
it, but
right now, especially since we don't know what LDAR and gas distribution are going to do, OQ is a moving target. So as soon as that final rule come out, each operator is going to have to go, oh my gosh, okay, what do we need to do? Do we need more people? Do we need additional training, different equipment? And then you've got to, process through the area. And certainly gas distribution also has management of change requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to, at that point, when that comes final, is you'll have to develop that management of change process. And so then reviewing everything has to go through a certain order. So if it comes out in the final rule, this world's going to continue to change. Ben's already talked about adding additional regulations. So stay connected, keep your eyes open, if you're not with an association or LinkedIn or something, seeing where these notices come out, you need to really stay aware to see, what may be affecting you. And then again, I already talked about the PSMS along the lines with PHMSA's push. OQ for new construction really needs to be in place for that. Transmission companies for gas and liquid have all fought OQ for new construction. That's been since day one. At some point, PHMSA is going to probably make that change. I'm not saying they are. I don't. I have no. I don't. I can't. I'm ex parte. I can't find out any information over anybody else. So, but I think that will eventually come. These states that have these strict OQ plans, other states are looking at it to say, hey, I think we can utilize that. Some may even take it in its entirety or make a few changes instead of rebuilding the wheel. We're in this for compliance and safety. Everyone's role is so important to make sure that it works. And OQ's, really one of those fundamental pieces that affects every part of your operation.
So if you're hearing it like I did, ear to the ground, create relationships with other peers, join industry associations or groups where information is shared, so you can look up and learn, especially when an incident happens. We think we just talked about that at the beginning. Everything's under a microscope now. There's going to be a reaction to any significant incident. And it's an important part of PSMS of looking at, here's what's happening. What can we learn? What can we learn from what happened to someone else? And let's reflect on our own operations and improve. And back when you were speaking about training too, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, the importance of documenting that training, and the more important having that documentation of training, as regulators and inspectors are looking for initial training. And so if you didn't document it, didn't happen. And I know we always like to say that. I want to go back to, we mentioned at the very beginning, the recent news that, 4 of 5 items in a court case were vacated by a court based on, not justifiable cost analysis. The Chevron doctrine, essentially earlier this year, the Supreme Court, revoked that, or appealed. I don't know the right term, but it is now no longer in place. And basically what that was where a regulatory agency could make a lot of justifications for its rules internally, and it was harder for industry to object to that, right? So I think the removal of that court case could increase the likelihood of challenges from industry. How do you think PHMSA will respond to this? And do you think we'll see more courts involved in the aftermath of a rulemaking process?
I think PHMSA is kind of in a tough spot with this Chevron decision.
Yeah.
Certainly, the operators can make challenges to PHMSA, which will take up more time and resources to justify regulation. So it'll slow things up. But I think that they'll probably see more challenges, especially if PHMSA puts into something in the final rule that was not mandated by Congress or not recommended by NTSB. If they were to overreach, I think that they may see some additional paperwork come in saying we don't agree with this and we want to take this to court. This could even impact the outcome of the LDAR when that final rule pops out, and certainly the gas distribution rulemaking.
It's interesting. Something I know that you're very passionate about is educating the public. We talked about, some of your background there of always advocating for certain things and making sure public awareness and customers were informed. But the educating the public about how important the oil and gas industry is to our daily lives. Is there anything you'd like to address about that?
Well, again, this is just my opinion, but I think it's shared by a few people out there. But it seems like the oil and gas industry is certainly misunderstood and a lot of times misrepresented to the public. So many folks don't know what part of their day-to-day world is touched by oil and gas. There are too many people out there that believe electricity just comes out of the air and it's not generated by natural gas, coal, or other sources. It's time that industry leaders get together and make a program to show America just what will go away if oil and gas does go away. Medicine, makeup, manufacturing, wind turbines. Well, without the oil and gas industry, transportation, construction, and living costs will skyrocket. Taxes that the feds and the states have been receiving from the sale of natural gas, gasoline, and diesel will have to be collected somewhere else, and you know where it's going to come from. I'd like to see INGA, API, APGA, AGA, and any other association, along with operators, sit down and put together a program that would really show the misinformed here in America about our industry. Rob Darden, he works with the Distribution Contractors Association. He's already laid out some real solid groundwork on this, got a nice format put together. But it takes money to put this together in a format, whether it's an hour-long presentation that, shows what's there, shows the different cost, educating people in what is actually occurring. But I really believe that it would be of value for all of those who would contribute. And I'm going to tell you one more thing on this. The oil and gas industry is not going away. You can hear the rumbling about shutting it down, but this is the largest industry in the country. Anything that's anywhere, it takes energy. It takes energy to manufacture almost everything out there, transport it, and the byproducts that are used in the medicines, makeup, and most everything we touch. Instead of some of the folks spending time on how to get rid of this industry, I'd really like them to spend time how to make it more efficient.
Warren, I know a lot of people, including myself in the industry, look up to you, look to you for guidance, and very much value your advice. What are some closing thoughts to share with our audience?
Set a high bar for excellence and skill in this industry. Every industry has people who really aren't a good fit. If some people don't have the ability to do it, that's okay. So if you got folks that struggling, takes them 8 or 9 times to get OQ qualified, you might consider that maybe that's not the right position for them. It happens all the time. I will tell you, the smell alone can be kind of crazy in the industry between mercaptan that you put into the natural gas and, of course, crude oil. A lot of folks could literally get turned off and not be able to do their work just because of that. But it's okay. It's okay for them if they want a different career. Leaders need to understand that not everyone can do this work. If you are a compliance specialist, if you're doing the compliance work for your company, it's so important for you to know the regulations. It takes reading, studying, and being involved, whether it's pipeline safety conferences, other learning conferences, but stay current with what's going on in this industry. And this industry is about relationships. If you make a life of this industry, cultivate friendships with folks who have the same passion, not necessarily the same goals. I've been blessed to have a small group across the country where we can call and ask questions for honest answers, even if we're working for competitors. That being said, be careful of bridges. Those burnt may come back to haunt you. With the mergers and acquisitions that are happening across the country, anybody can end up your boss.
There's some advice and food for thought. Warren, thank you so much for sharing, your expertise and some last thoughts. it's time for the audience. Please enter any questions you have for Warren into the Q&A chat box feature of Zoom. And note that if we run out of time answering your questions, we'll follow up with you after the webinar. And so while we wait for you to enter some of those questions in, we're going to do a couple things. Warren, let's look at some of the retirement projects you're looking forward to really getting into, and tell us about them.
Well, first off, I'm going to hope to do more fishing. Got a couple of these 2-pound crappie that day, and I'm looking to add a few more cats this fall when I go out catfishing. And then I hope to get my shop back in place so I can start turning wood again. And then later on, I'll probably try to find some type of volunteer work, and look forward to that too.
And like I said, our community is blessed to have you and your wife here. Now, let's recap on 5 main takeaways from this webinar.
Well, the first one, really need to look at each individual you've got and look at the training needs and of those individuals. Again, not everybody needs all of the training, but there may be somebody that does. Change is coming to this industry, and it is inevitable. One thing to fight it. Another thing is to, figure out what it takes to handle it. Look at your enhancing your damage prevention by emphasizing training for your company and contractor locators. Really believe that's an important part that will pay benefits before you know it. Industry really needs to tell its own story to the public. I'd really like to see this happen, and I'd be involved in something like that if it were to come to pass. And then develop those strong relationships. I can't tell you how important they are, especially later on, if you need something, or if you just need some type of backup. A lot of times those relationships will do you well.
Thank you for that recap, Warren. So don't forget about the opportunity for obtaining CEUs, continuing education credits, unit credits. Again, we'll send a feedback form out with these takeaways in an email to you being an attendant, as long as you have your email address in there. And also like to point out that we have an upcoming event for our clients. The ITS User Conference is happening in Nashville, Tennessee, just around the corner next month in October, the 16th and the 17th. Registration is still free, and there is a great lineup of speakers who are going to help you get the most out of the many different solutions ITS offers for the pipeline industry and for compliance. There's also going to be a breakout session track fully dedicated to pipeline safety management systems, with representation from API, American Petroleum Institute will be there. And that's going to be a great way to learn. If you're one of those smaller operators, mid-size operators that really haven't gotten into PSMS, great way to learn how to start and create and improve your PSMS initiatives. You can go to its-training.com/conference to find out more about how to get registered, or give us a buzz. Before the user conference, you'll also be able to get some training, some advanced administrator training, or we're offering in-person evaluator and proctor training for our program. Throughout the conference, our customer service team will also be providing hands-on demonstrations of our apps and our services. It's always a great time, and it's a great time to build relationships. So again, at this time, like you to enter any questions and answers. Looks like we have one so far. So if you want an opportunity to ask Warren a question, here's your chance. Please enter that into the Q&A feature in Zoom. We're about at time. And again, if we don't get to your question, you can always follow up with Warren. Warren, our first question, you mentioned studying for for OQ professionals to study and be prepared for, do you ever recommend memorizing regulation?
I don't, because I try to read them every time I looked at them to, make sure I'm reading it the same way. And it's one of those things, as some things are amended. If you've looked at it and memorized it one way and it's changed and you don't go back to it, it can catch you.
Yeah, so it's just know how to look it up and be informed about it, but you never know. Another question's come in. Do you have any further comments about the shortage of people who can understand fundamental instructions?
I think companies are going to have to start looking into high school and VOTEC much more than thinking about the college graduates, because I think we've lost a lot of those folks that will learn what the program is and then grow up through it. And so I think it's important to start with somebody who may not already have a predisposition on certain way of working, and so he can be trained correctly. Again, it goes back to the training, so important.
We have someone who wanted to wish you, Warren, the best retirement ever. You've been instrumental in providing her guidance, and she appreciates your years of friendship and service in the industry. So thank you. We also have someone that has typed in half of a question, so I don't really know what they want to ask, but we are running out of time. So thank you all for your time with us and for taking part in this. Thank you, Warren, for your time and expertise in this session and in all the many sessions. And remember, you guys can look up past episodes on our website, its-training.com. And we have all the recorded webinars available. You can watch on the GPAC, on the LDAR, all these things we've mentioned. We've dug into them. So check those out as resources. And while Warren is retiring, Regulation Navigation will continue each quarter, brought to you by ITS. We're going to address the most pressing topics in our industry and gather insights from key thought leaders. So please mark your calendar for our next Regulation Navigation webinar, tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, December 11th. Stay tuned. More on that coming, and please stay safe. Warren, one last word.
Wow. What a ride. Sorry about that.
Oh, we love you, man.
Little did I know I would be blessed like this. Darn. Blessed to have some good friends that helped and guided me in so many ways, made me laugh, and helped me keep a little sanity. Darn it. And blessed to have my wife, Janet, of almost 29 years, who has stuck with me through a lot. 2003, I was on the road 42 weeks when OQ came out, but we made it. I want to thank you for the listening to an old man ramble one last time. It's been an honor to be involved with these webinars in the industry. Stay aware, stay safe, and enjoy your day. Thanks a lot.